The Force is light and full of shadows.
Before we dive in, check the link in the description if you want exclusive Timelines members-only videos you won't find on YouTube, all on our Patreon. The first breath is not a breath. It is a mechanical event. A piston driving air into lungs that no longer remember how to want it. The suit decides. The lungs comply. Somewhere between the two, a man wakes up inside a machine and understands, in the space of a single inhale, exactly where he is. Exactly when he is. Mustafar, the cave system beneath the eastern volcanic shelf, where the lava channels run shallow and the air tastes of sulfur and scorched basalt. He knows this cave. He has never stood in it before. The suit's first breath was drawn somewhere else entirely, in a Coruscant medical facility surrounded by surgical light, and the Emperor's patient, watchful silence, and the hours between that moment and this one are a blurred sequence of transit and instruction, and Palpatine's precise, deliberate voice explaining what was expected of Lord Vader's first act. "Come to Mustafar," the voice had said, "the place of your becoming. What you must do next, you will do there." He knows this cave not because he has stood in it, but because he is 45 years old, and he has spent 2 decades trying to forget the day it became the wound his life was measured from. And he has failed, every single night, in the dark behind a mask he never removes. Except the mask has been on his face for less than 1 day. He nearly drops the lightsaber. The hilt is in his right hand, the mechanical one, the fingers that register pressure as data rather than sensation, and the crystal inside it is screaming. Not metaphorically. The Force carries its voice the way it carries everything, as a frequency below sound, a vibration in the sternum, a pitch that lives behind the eyes. It is the sound of something being unmade, something begging for it to stop. He knows that sound. He has heard it from the inside. The crystal is one Palpatine selected from the ruins of the temple, taken from a dead master's hilt with the clinical ease of a man collecting tools, handed over in transit with the specific warmth of someone offering a gift that is also a command. Take this, and make it yours, and I will know what you have become. The Emperor's gift. The Emperor's test. A green crystal still carrying the living frequency of the person who last held it, terrified and raw with the particular grief of something that was someone's before it was made into an instrument. He knows that grief too. His fingers tighten around the hilt. The servos in his gauntlet click and whir. Every movement in this suit announces itself. A constant mechanical confession of what was done and what was lost, and the crystal's keening climbs half an octave in response. Stop, he tells himself. Stop, he does not ignite it. He stands in the cave, and he breathes. The suit breathes for him. The rhythmic mechanical hiss of the respirator the only sound besides the distant boil of lava below. And he takes 30 years of grief and holds it perfectly still in both hands. Memories arrive the way drowning arrives, not in sequence. Luke's face turned toward him in the carbon-freezing chamber, so young it carved something open in his chest even then. Luke's face again on a second Death Star, older, certain, refusing to stop believing. And how that certainty had felt like being found after decades of being deliberately, furiously lost. The weight of an armored man collapsing in his son's arms, the extraordinary, stupid, irreversible peace of dying forgiven. He had not expected peace to feel like exhaling. He is 22 years old. His wife is alive. His children have not yet been born. The Emperor is sitting in the Imperial Palace on Coruscant, patient as erosion, waiting for his new weapon to finish its first trial. And in his right hand, a kyber crystal is screaming, because it is halfway through being destroyed by a man who no longer exists. Vader lowers himself to one knee. The suit protests, servos grinding, the left knee joint catching on a half-locked actuator. A small mechanical agony that radiates up through the suit's feedback system, and he plants that knee on the cave floor, in the basalt dust, and he breathes. The respirator catches, a ragged, broken hiccup in the rhythm. No tears come. There is no mechanism for tears in this mask, no room for them in the filtered air cycling through the rebreather. But the sound of it, that stuttered mechanical catch, is grief made functional. Grief filed down to the only form the suit permits. He opens the force connection to the crystal the way he once opened his hand on a burning mountainside. Not grasping, not taking. Offering, "I know what you are," he whispers. The vocoder flattens the words into something harder than he intends. He tries again, quieter, below the level the external speaker picks up. Felt, not heard. "I know what you are. I know what I did to you. I'm sorry, and I'm not going to hurt you again." The crystal does not believe him. Of course it doesn't. The force signature it has been absorbing for the last hour is made of rage and self-annihilation, and the particular violence of a man tearing his own soul in half. Why would it believe him? He doesn't ask it to. He simply stops fighting it, stops pushing, stops performing the act of domination that bleeding requires. He puts down everything: the fear of Palpatine, the calculus of survival, the 10,000 tactical concerns that will arrive in the next hour like a flood, and he replaces it with the simplest thing he has access to. He thinks about his mother, singing. He thinks about Padmé laughing at something he said that wasn't quite as clever as he thought. He thinks about a boy who watched twin suns set over Tatooine every evening and somehow maintained the absolute, irrational conviction that the galaxy was worth saving. The keening drops. Not all at once. In stages. The way a person stops crying. Not a decision, just an exhaustion of the thing driving it. The shrill, dissonant edge bleeds out of the frequency first. Then the pitch drops. Then it levels into something lower, steadier, a vibration that hums instead of screams. Then a sound he has no word for, warm, resonant. The acoustic equivalent of a door opening. The cave floor fills with light. Pale, blue-white, sourceless, it pools outward from his closed fist in slow rings, like something breathing. And for a moment the sulfur cave looks almost holy. Lava glow and cold white light, and a man in a black suit kneeling in the center of it with his forehead nearly touching the ground. He stays there for a long time. Then he straightens, and the calculus arrives, cold and immediate, the way it always does when the feeling portion of a problem ends and the operational portion begins. A white blade. If he walks out of this cave with a white blade, he is dead before the week ends. And not just him. Every Jedi crouched in an attic on some outer rim planet. Every Padawan who ran the right direction when the clones raised their rifles. Every refugee of a purge that has not yet been called by name. They die with him. Because without him inside the machinery, there is no one to misdirect the patrols. No one to bury the sighting reports. No one to quietly make the Empire's great hunting apparatus point the wrong direction. The righteous choice would kill them all. He opens the hilt. The crystal sits in its cradle like a small star. White as bone, white as the inside of a closed eye, warm in a way that has nothing to do with temperature. He looks at it for exactly as long as he allows himself. Then he sets it on the cave floor and begins to work. The emitter matrix is Imperial standard. He helped design the spec 2 years ago, a version of himself he cannot cleanly remember, and he knows its tolerances the way he knows the sound of Padmé's voice. His mechanical fingers move through the disassembly, with a precision no organic hand could match. A lens mount here, a focusing ring there. The internal channel array lifted free of its housing and set aside on a flat section of basalt. The filter he constructs from the wreckage of a secondary focusing crystal, cracked, semi-conductive, optically impure. Ground down against the basalt floor by a mechanical thumb, pressing with exactly 4.2 kilograms of sustained force. Shaped by instinct, and 22 years of engineering experience, and one very specific understanding of how light bends through fractured lattice structures. It takes 40 minutes. It takes a lifetime. He reassembles the hilt in the dark, component by component, the cave's white light fading as the crystal is sealed back inside. Tests the focus alignment, by instinct. Rechecks the emitter tolerance, locks the housing. Then he stands, and ignites it. The blade is red, the color of rage, the color of everything Palpatine expects to see, the color that means the screaming worked, the breaking worked, the boy is gone and the weapon is ready. He stares at it for a long time, the lava light plays against it. Somewhere beneath the red, if you knew exactly what to look for, if you were, perhaps, a 45-year-old man who had spent decades knowing exactly what he had buried, and exactly how far down, you might catch the faintest undertone in the blade's core. The ghost of white inside the red, barely visible, perfectly contained. The lie is convincing. He has spent a long time learning from the best. He extinguishes the blade, stands in the dark, breathes, let them see the lie, he thinks, and in the silence of the cave his vocoder does not carry the words to anyone. I'll keep the truth. Coruscant from above looks like a prayer answered wrong. Every light a life. Every life a number in a ledger Palpatine has been balancing for 30 years. The city planet sprawls beneath the landing shuttle in all directions, without horizon, without edge, without the mercy of a single dark patch where something might be allowed to exist outside the count. From up here, in the viewport of a shuttle descending toward the Imperial Palace's private landing tier, it is almost beautiful. Vader watches it the way a man watches something he burned down. The landing struts engage with a hydraulic clunk. The ramp descends. He walks down it into the recycled palace air, climate-controlled to exactly the temperature Palpatine prefers, which is slightly too cold for human comfort and precisely calibrated, Vader suspects, to remind every visitor that even the air in this building obeys a different will than theirs. 4 royal guards flank the corridor beyond. They do not speak. They do not need to. Their positioning is the sentence. You are expected, and you are not here because you chose to be. He follows them in. The throne room is not yet the throne room it will become. In this version, 19 BB, the Empire 11 days old, it is still transitional. Still wearing the bones of the old Republic executive chamber beneath the new Imperial aesthetic. The Senate seals have been removed from the walls, but the adhesive ghosts remain. Pale rectangular outlines on dark stone. The lighting has been changed to something lower, more directional. Designed to leave the throne in relative shadow, and everything approaching it in a strip of surgical illumination. Palpatine sits at its center and lets the architecture do his work for him. He looks, in this light, like something that has always been here, something geological. An emperor carved from the same stone as the walls, patient in the way that erosion is patient, content to simply outlast every alternative. Lord Vader, he says. The voice has changed. Or rather, it has stopped pretending. The Senate orator's warmth, the avuncular texture that Anakin Skywalker heard across a decade of manipulation, is gone. What remains is the instrument underneath, dry, precise, each word placed with the care of a man who understands that language is simply another form of force application. Vader stops at the prescribed distance. 10 meters. Close enough for conversation. Far enough that any movement toward the throne would be unambiguous. Master, he says. The vocoder delivers the word in its flattened mechanical register. Whatever inflection he intended, and he intended none, is processed out of it. He is grateful, suddenly, for the mask. Grateful for a face that cannot be read. Show me, Palpatine says. No preamble, no ritual. The directness of a man who has already decided what he expects to see and wants only the confirmation. Vader draws the lightsaber and ignites it. The red blade extends into the throne room's cold air. It burns steadily. No flicker, no instability. The filter work was precise, and the crystal inside it has, for reasons Palpatine will never be permitted to understand, stopped fighting its housing entirely. The blade looks exactly like what it is supposed to look like. The color of a soul correctly broken. Palpatine's eyes move across it with the attention of an appraiser. Something in his expression, not quite satisfaction, not quite relief, something more clinical than either. Settles, good, he says, and the word carries the specific warmth of a man complimenting a tool that has performed within spec. Vader extinguishes the blade. Says nothing. Waits. The silence that follows is not empty. He feels it before it arrives, the particular gathering pressure in the force that precedes a deliberate probe, the way the air pressure shifts before lightning. Palpatine does not ask permission. He simply reaches, the way a hand reaches into a pocket that belongs to it, and the touch lands against the outer layer of Vader's mind with the delicate, terrible precision of a surgical instrument. This is what Vader prepared for, in the 40-minute shuttle descent from Mustafar, in the hours before sleep that he will not actually be permitted to have for the next several weeks. He did not construct a wall. Walls invite pressure testing. Walls say there is something on the other side of me worth protecting. Instead, he constructed a landscape. Rage, loss, the white heat of Padmé's final face, blurred by oxygen deprivation and the first confused moments inside the suit. The specific, unbearable grief of a man who burned the only thing he was ever certain he loved and cannot undo the burning. He presents this to Palpatine the way you present a wound, openly, without flinching, with the implicit message that a wound this large has no room inside it for anything else. Every piece of it is true. He is not lying. He is simply showing Palpatine an older photograph and allowing him to assume it was taken this morning. The probe moves through the grief like a hand moving through smoke. Looking for structure. Looking for the clean lines of a plan, the cool geometry of a secret kept. It finds only wreckage. A man reduced to his damage, to the raw animal facts of loss and fury, and the first terrifying hours of a body he does not yet know how to inhabit. Palpatine withdraws. "You grieve," he observes. Not gently. Clinically, the way a doctor notes a symptom that falls within expected parameters. "Yes," Vader says. "Good." The Emperor leans back in the throne, and the shadow reclaims him by a fraction. "Grief is fuel, Lord Vader. The Jedi spent 1,000 years teaching their people to drain the tank. We have no such handicap. A pause, the length of exactly one breath. You will find that it burns cleaner than anger. Longer, more reliably." Vader says nothing. He agrees with none of it. He files the statement away as intelligence about how Palpatine intends to manage him, which is more useful than arguing would be. "I have a role for you," Palpatine continues, and his tone shifts, the slight elevation of a man who has arrived at the point. "There are Jedi who survived the Purge. A small number, statistically insignificant. But symbolically, he lets the word rest for a moment, precisely weighted. Symbols have a habit of becoming problems if left unaddressed. He produces a datapad and extends it. A guardsman carries it forward. Vader takes it, reads it in 3 seconds. The Inquisitorius, the structure, the mandate, the personnel roster of fallen and broken Force sensitives already in custody, already in the early stages of conversion. A hunting apparatus, an organization built with one purpose, handed to him with what Palpatine intends as a gift. "You burned the order," the gesture says. "Now finish it. You will have full command authority," Palpatine says. "Training methodology, operational deployment, intelligence priorities. I trust your judgment in these matters completely." The last sentence delivered with the specific warmth of a man who means the opposite and knows he doesn't need to say so. Complete authority in this context means complete accountability. If the Inquisitorius fails, the failure will have Vader's name on it. "I am honored," Vader says. The vocoder carries it flatly, which is correct. Palpatine studies him for a moment. The eyes, yellow gold, the color of something corrupted all the way through to the base material, move across the mask the way they moved across the blade. Looking for the flaw in the casting. He finds none. "There is one more thing," Palpatine says, and his voice drops a register. Intimate now. Confessional. The voice he used when he wanted Anakin Skywalker to feel chosen. "The transition has been difficult. The suit, the adjustment. I want you to know. A pause with the texture of genuine feeling, manufactured with expert precision. What you sacrificed was not nothing. What you gave up, to be here, to serve, it was necessary," Vader says. The interruption is small, calibrated, a man too raw for comfort, cutting off the sympathy before it breaks something. Palpatine reads it exactly that way. His expression moves. Not quite a smile, not quite satisfaction, but the quiet pleasure of a teacher watching a student perform above expectation. "Yes," he says simply. "It was." Later, in a corridor 3 levels below the throne room, walking alone toward the landing tier because the royal guards peeled away at the checkpoint, and here there is no one to perform for, Vader allows himself exactly 4 seconds of stillness. He thinks of the Inquisitorius roster on the datapad. Names, species, Force sensitivity ratings, current psychological status. People who have already been broken, or are in the process of being broken, handed to him on a list with the implicit instruction to finish the job. He thinks of what can be done with a broken weapon that still looks functional from the outside. He walks on, and the sound of the respirator echoes off the corridor walls with the patience of something that has already decided to outlast every obstacle between itself and the far end of a very long game. The Inquisitorius facility does not appear on any public Imperial chart. It exists in the administrative record as Substation 11, a signals relay node on a mid-orbit platform above Nur, an ocean moon of the volcanic planet Mustafar that appears on navigational databases as geologically unstable and of no strategic interest. The designation is accurate in the way that most Imperial designations are accurate, technically defensible, substantively false. What it actually is, a facility built into the moon's rock, half submerged in a black inland sea, accessible only by pressurized submersible from the surface, and designed from the foundation up to make everyone inside it feel like they are already drowning. Vader suspects Palpatine chose the location personally. He descends through the black water in the submersible's forward compartment, watching the facility's outer lights emerge from the dark below, cold blue-white, spaced in a grid pattern along the structure's hull, the kind of lighting that illuminates without warming, and he uses the descent to think. 11 minutes of submersion. He has timed it. 11 minutes is how long it takes, from the surface dock to the facility's pressurization lock, if the pilot holds standard descent speed. He makes a note, in the part of his mind that has started maintaining a second set of operational files beneath the first, that 11 minutes is also how long a well-placed explosive decompression event would take to become unrecoverable. He files it not as a threat, as an architectural fact. The difference between the two is the difference between a man who panics and a man who plans. They are waiting for him in the central training hall. 9 of them. The roster from Palpatine's datapad made flesh, or what flesh remained after the process that brought them here. They stand in a loose formation that wants to be a line and hasn't quite committed to the geometry, which tells him more about their current psychological state than their personnel files did. People who have been truly broken stand very still. People in the process of being broken can't hold a shape. He walks the length of the hall without speaking. The sound of the respirator and the servos is sufficient. He has learned, in the 11 days since the suit became his permanent architecture, that silence delivered correctly is a complete sentence. He reaches the far end of the hall, turns and faces them. They are afraid of him. That much is legible in the Force without effort. Fear reading is a high, tight frequency, like a string pulled past its natural tension. He does not try to ease it. Fear is the one thing Palpatine will expect him to cultivate here, and fear, in this particular context, is also operationally useful. Frightened subordinates do not scrutinize their commander's decisions. They execute them, quickly, and look away. "I am told," he says, "that you are warriors." No one responds. Correct response. "I am told that you were trained, or are being trained, in the Jedi arts, that you have access to the Force and to lightsabers, and that this makes you assets of the Empire." He pauses, and lets the pause carry weight. "I do not agree." That lands. He watches it move through the formation, a micro-shift, a collective recalibration, the subtle physical vocabulary of people trying to decide whether they have just been threatened or evaluated. "A lightsaber, in the hands of someone who learned to fear it," Vader continues, "is a liability, not an asset. The Jedi taught you to distrust power. Whatever has happened to you since has taught you to distrust yourselves." He stops in front of the nearest Inquisitor, a young Mirialan woman, her facial tattoos half obscured by a scar that runs jaw to temple, her eyes doing the thing eyes do when they are trying to show nothing and succeeding only in showing everything. That conflict does not make you dangerous. It makes you predictable. He moves on before she can respond. "I will teach you a new system," he says to all of them now, turning to address the hall. "It will be demanding. It will require complete commitment to the methodology." A pause. Those who train correctly will become the most feared duelists in the Empire. He means none of this in the way they are hearing it. The methodology he intends to teach is a deliberately engineered corruption of Gemso, the form he knows better than any living practitioner, which makes him uniquely qualified to understand exactly how to ruin it. Full power forward pressure strikes with no defensive recovery built into the combination. Aggressive linear attacks that commit the body fully to each blow, leaving the flanks open for exactly the half-second a competent defensive duelist needs. It will look, in the training hall, like a battering ram. It will feel, in practice, like being handed a blade that only cuts in one direction and told to fence with it. Against a panicking, untrained civilian, it will be devastating. Against a Jedi who has spent years drilling Soresu or Niman, it will be a gift. He begins the first lesson. 3 hours later, he sits alone in the facility's commander's office, a spare room, a desk, a terminal, the perpetual sound of pressurized water against the outer hull, and opens the Inquisitorius intelligence database with his full command authorization for the first time. The architecture of it is, in a word, comprehensive. 2 years of Imperial intelligence apparatus focused through the lens of a single question: where are the survivors? And the answer, compiled across 14,000 entries, is everywhere. Everywhere. And hiding badly, and being found at a rate that would exhaust the list within a decade, if nothing changes. He begins to read. Not to find Jedi. To understand the database's structure. To learn where its seams are, where the redundancies live, where a report can be misfiled in a way that looks like clerical error and lands in a queue that will not be processed for 6 weeks. It takes 4 hours. By the end of it, he has a complete map of how information moves through this system, from a field report to a deployment order. Every node, every checkpoint, every human hand the data passes through on its way to becoming an action. He starts with small alterations, the kind that have no individual signature. A priority flag changed from urgent to routine on a report out of the Outer Rim. A sighting report from Corellia Cross referenced against 3 other low-confidence reports and automatically downgraded to unconfirmed. A patrol deployment order for a sector near Adelon slightly misdated, not falsified, simply misdated, which means it arrives in the processing queue after the relevant window has closed. Each change is defensible. Bureaucratic noise. The database is large, the volume of incoming intelligence is high, and the Empire, for all its organizational apparatus, is 11 days old. It is not yet efficient. It is not expected to be efficient. Inefficiency, at this stage, is the water the Empire swims in, and he is simply swimming in it with intent. He works until the blue-white lights beyond the office viewport cycle into their night shift dimming pattern, and then he sits back and looks at what he has done. 14 entries processed. 3 Jedi leads effectively buried. 1 patrol rerouted through a clerical mismatch. 11 days until the Corellian sighting surfaces again in the queue, by which point the individual described will, if they have any sense, be somewhere else entirely. It is not enough. It will never feel like enough. But it is the shape of what is possible on day 1, and he is a man who has learned, at extraordinary cost, to distinguish between what he can do and what he wishes he could do. He closes the terminal. The facility hums around him. Water pressure, ventilation systems, the distant rhythmic sound of an inquisitor running forms in the training hall below. The footsteps audible through the floor if you are the kind of person who listens for them. The Mirialan woman. Drilling alone at the end of her shift, he registered her name from the roster, Isket. Former Padawan of a master who fell before Order 66 made the losses official. She has been in Imperial custody for 9 days, and she trains with the intensity of someone trying to burn a question out of her own mind through sheer repetition. He knows that intensity. He spent 20 years feeding it. He adds her name to a second list, not the official one, not the roster he will hand to Palpatine when operational reports are due. The other one. The one that exists only in his memory, written in no file, transmitted to no system. The list of people inside this facility who are not yet all the way gone, who might, if handled correctly, if pointed in the right direction at the right moment, choose differently than he did. He does not know yet what he will do with that list. He knows he will not waste it. The budget line reads, Prototype TIE Variant, Experimental Propulsion Research, Black Project Designation, Oryx 7. It does not exist. There is no Oryx 7. There is no experimental propulsion research. There is no prototype anything in the facility the line item references, because the facility itself is a shell, a decommissioned Imperial logistics depot on Lantilles that exists in the administrative record as active, staffed, and consuming resources at a rate consistent with a mid-tier weapons development program. Its actual staff count is 0. Its actual resource consumption is 0. What it actually is, to the 4 people in the galaxy who know it exists in this form, is a drain in the Imperial budget that empties not into research and development, but into a network of safe houses, forged travel documents, and bribed Port Authority officials strung across the outer rim like a quiet constellation. Vader created it on day 19. He is now on day 41, and the second budget line, Inquisitorious Operational Expenses, Covert Informant Maintenance, Sector 7 Alpha, has just cleared its first Imperial auditing checkpoint, without a flag. He reads the confirmation on his private terminal in the NER facility's commander's office, at the end of a shift that officially ended 2 hours ago, and allows himself nothing in response. Not satisfaction, not relief. The absence of a flag is not a success. It is simply the absence of immediate catastrophe, which is the only metric available to him right now. He closes the confirmation and opens the next file. The network has no official name. The people inside it. The former Republic logistics officer on Alderaan who moves funds without asking where they go. The retired clone trooper on Corellia who knows which dock supervisors can be paid to look at the wrong manifest. The Ithorian monk on Takodana whose monastery has a basement that doesn't appear on any structural filing. Call the unseen hand behind their operations by the name they chose themselves. The Ghost. He learned this 3 days ago from an intercepted communication he was never supposed to see. A field report from an ISB agent embedded near a hidden path transfer point on Ord Mantell, describing local refugee network chatter, flagged for inquisitorious review. The report landed in his queue, because everything lands in his queue. He read the word ghost in the agent's transcription of an overheard conversation between 2 refugees who were describing their benefactor with the specific reverence people reserve for things they cannot explain. He had sat with that for a long time. He does not know how he feels about being a legend to the people he is saving. It does not seem like the relevant question. The relevant question is whether the ISB agent's report gets buried deeply enough that no one else reads it, and the answer to that question is yes, it does. And it took him 40 seconds. The operation on Christophsis nearly fails on day 43. It begins with a sighting report, credible, sourced, time-stamped within 6 hours. A Jedi survivor of the Purge identified by a local Imperial garrison commander who recognized a lightsaber hilt in a market stall seizure and made the connection faster than anyone should have. The report hits the Inquisitorious intake queue at 0340 Standard Time and is flagged automatically as high priority, which means it bypasses the standard processing lag and surfaces directly in 3 separate commander inboxes. One of those inboxes belongs to the 5th brother. He is already composing a deployment request when Vader intercepts the flag from his own terminal. 8 minutes after the report's initial entry. 8 minutes is the margin. He has thought about margins a great deal in the last 41 days. The distance between a thing being fine and a thing being catastrophic, measured in minutes and file positions, and the specific bureaucratic geography of an intelligence queue. He opens the original report. Reads it. Notes the garrison commander's name, rank, and posting. Notes the market stall's location in Christophsis' lower commercial district. Notes the lightsaber hilt's description, cylindrical, non-standard emitter shroud, consistent with late Republic Jedi construction. He notes that the hilt's owner, if they are still within 6 hours of the market stall's location, is already dead if an Inquisitor deploys within the next 4 hours. He cross-references the garrison commander's report against 2 existing low-confidence sighting reports he had previously filed under unconfirmed, organic source, no corroboration, reports he had seeded himself, through a low-level Imperial informant he controls, describing Jedi activity in 2 separate systems nowhere near Christophsis. He attaches the Christophsis report to the cluster. He changes its sourcing flag from Garrison Command, confirmed physical evidence to unconfirmed. Possible coordinated disinformation, See attached cluster analysis. He writes 4 sentences of analysis in the attached note, using the specific bureaucratic language of an intelligence professional who has seen this pattern before and is appropriately skeptical. The language is precise and sounds exactly like caution. It is caution deployed as a weapon. He refiles the report under pending secondary verification, minimum 72-hour hold. Then he opens a separate, encrypted channel, one of 7 he maintains through a routing architecture so layered that its origin point resolves to any analyst following the thread as an automated relay station in the Kessel system, and he sends a single line of text to the Alderaan logistics contact. Christophsis Lower Commercial, the Market District. Now, no signature. The ghost doesn't sign things. He closes the channel, sits back. The nerve facility hums its pressurized underwater hum around him. Somewhere in the training hall below, the night shift is running forms. He will not know if it worked for at least 6 days. When the 72-hour hold expires and the secondary verification request goes unanswered, because there is no secondary source, and the report will quietly degrade to low confidence and sink. He adds Christophsis to the second list, not the one with names, but the one with locations. Places where the thread came close enough to the surface that someone might, in retrospect, notice a pattern. He has 14 locations on that list now. 14 moments where the intervention was real time, where the margin was minutes rather than days. 14 is too many. He knows this. The pattern is not yet visible. He is certain of this the way he is certain of anything in an intelligence environment, which is to say, provisionally, with the constant background awareness that certainty in this work is the first symptom of fatal overconfidence. On day 47, a package arrives at the nerve facility, addressed to Commander of the Inquisitorius, Imperial Authority. No sender designation. Inside, a single Jogan fruit, perfectly ripe, wrapped in a square of rough outer rim cloth. The cloth has no markings. The fruit has no message attached. There is no way to trace the sender through the facility's intake manifest, because the package was logged by a dock officer who will, when interviewed later, remember nothing unusual about it. He holds the fruit for a long time. Someone in the network knows where he is. Not who he is. If they knew who he was, the fruit would not have been sent, because no refugee of the Purge would send a gift to Darth Vader. They know where the Ghost's operational center is, or they have guessed close enough that the difference is academic. This is either the most dangerous thing that has happened in 47 days, or it is exactly what it appears to be, a thank you from people who have no other currency. He sets the fruit on the corner of his desk. He does not eat it. The suit makes that impossible, and there is something appropriate about that, he thinks. A gift he can receive but not use. He looks at it for the remainder of the shift, between terminal entries, as the facility cycles through its routines around him. When the shift ends, he leaves it there, a small, absurd, entirely human thing in a room built for something else. He tells himself he will dispose of it tomorrow. He does not. He will not. It will sit on that desk for 6 more weeks, slowly past ripeness, and he will look at it every shift without quite being able to explain why he cannot remove it. And he will not examine the explanation too closely, because some truths are more useful left in the peripheral vision than looked at directly. He has learned, at tremendous cost, which truths those are. Tatooine from orbit looks like a wound that never closed. 2 suns, 1 system, and a planet that absorbed both of them for 4 billion years, and has nothing to show for it but heat and debt. The sand goes all the way down. There is no water table worth the drilling, no temperate zone worth the settlement, no feature of the landscape that suggests the planet consented to being inhabited. It exists in the Imperial administrative record as Outer Rim, low priority, negligible strategic value, which is precisely why he is here. He came alone. No inquisitors, no escort, no logged flight plan. The shuttle is a commandeered civilian transport, swept for trackers and re-registered under a false hull ID that will dissolve back into the dummy database it came from the moment he leaves atmosphere. To Imperial traffic control, this vessel does not exist. To the Tatooine Port Authority at Mos Eisley, it is a Corellian freighter carrying machine parts for a moisture farming equipment supplier. And the dock officer who processed the landing manifest is, As of 20 minutes ago, 1,500 credits wealthier and significantly less curious than he was before. He has been planning this for 60 days. He has been arguing with himself about it for 61. The coordinates resolve to a structure in the Jundland wastes, tucked into the rock face of a canyon wall with the specific, deliberate inconspicuousness of something that wants to be mistaken for geological accident. A modest dwelling. Single occupancy. The kind of place a man lives when he has accepted that living small is the price of living at all. Vader lands the transport 2 kilometers out and walks. The twin suns are at their midday peak, and the heat index is not something the suit's environmental systems were designed to consider trivial. They manage it. Everything in his life now is managed by systems that run the calculations his body no longer can. He walks through the heat and the sand and the silence of the wastes, and the sound of his own breathing fills the space inside the mask the way it always does. Constant. Mechanical. The metronome of a life measured out in respirator cycles. He knows this walk. He has never taken it before. He knows it because a different version of him, in a different nightmare, came here once with a search in his heart that ended badly, and the canyon walls look exactly the way they looked in the memory that isn't his yet. He stops outside the dwelling's entrance. An old wooden door, sun-bleached, set into the rock. A single step up from the sand. He raises his hand to knock, and the door opens before he can. Obi-Wan Kenobi looks older than he should. 60 days. 60 days since the Republic died and the Order burned, and whatever life Obi-Wan Kenobi had built for himself over 40 years collapsed into a single remaining function: keep the boy alive. He is wearing desert robes the color of the canyon wall. His beard is already longer than it was on Coruscant. There are lines around his eyes that weren't there before, or weren't visible before, or that Anakin was never paying the right kind of attention to see. He stands in the doorway and looks at the black armor and the mask and the red-eye lenses, and he does not move. His hand does not go to his hip, where a lightsaber used to live and no longer does. His face does not change. Whatever Obi-Wan Kenobi is feeling in this moment, he is not going to let it happen in the doorway. "I wondered," he says, "when you would come." The voice is the same, measured, warm even now, with the specific quality of warmth that comes not from ease but from discipline. A man who has decided that steadiness is the one gift he can still offer the universe and is going to offer it regardless of cost. Vader says nothing for a moment. There is a great deal he prepared to say on the 2-hour flight from Mustafar's orbit. None of it is available to him right now. "You're not going to invite me in," he says. "I'm deciding," Obi-Wan replies. Not hostile. Honest. The silence between them has 40 years of history in it. Vader lets it sit there. He has learned, in the last 60 days, that some silences are load-bearing and should not be disturbed before they are ready. Obi-Wan steps back from the door. The interior of the dwelling is one room, and everything in it is necessary, and nothing is decorative. A sleeping mat. A cooking surface. A small table with 2 chairs that suggests, despite the single occupancy, that the possibility of a second person was always accounted for. A shelf with 3 books and a comlink, and a folded set of robes that are slightly too small to be Obi-Wan's. A set of robes sized for a child. Vader looks at them, and looks away. He takes the chair Obi-Wan gestures toward and sits, and the suit's servos make their small announcements of the movement. And the sound of them in this small room is obscene in the way that weapons are obscene, in places built for ordinary life. Obi-Wan sits across from him and folds his hands on the table, and waits. "He's safe," Vader says. "Yes, the Larses. Yes. They don't know. No. They know enough. And no more." Obi-Wan's eyes move across the mask with the careful attention of a man reading a text in a language he once knew fluently and is now uncertain of. "How long have you been?" He stops. Chooses a different question. "How long?" "Since Mustafar. Since the first breath." Something moves across Obi-Wan's face. Not quite grief and not quite relief and not quite the particular expression a man makes when a hypothesis he was afraid to fully form turns out to be correct. Something that contains elements of all 3 and resolves into none of them cleanly. I felt something, he says quietly. In the Force. When the suit came online. A shift. Something that should have been dark that wasn't entirely dark. He pauses. I told myself it was wishful thinking. It wasn't. No, a long breath. No, I can see that it wasn't. Vader puts his hands on the table, the mechanical fingers, the black gauntlets, the suit that is a monument to every catastrophic choice made by a man who sat in rooms like this one and was afraid to ask for help. He puts his hands on the table and looks at them. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness, he says. I know. I'm not here to explain myself. I know that too. Obi-Wan's voice is steady in the way that water running over stone is steady, not because nothing is happening beneath it, but because what is happening beneath it has been happening for long enough that the surface has learned to be still. Why are you here, Anakin? The name lands differently than it should. It lands like something he did not know he was hungry for until it was offered. He takes a moment. Padmé, he says. Obi-Wan closes his eyes briefly, opens them, nods once. She's on Alderaan, Vader says. Senator Organa has her. She's safe, he stops. Recalibrates. There is a clinical version of this sentence and there is a true version. And he owes Obi-Wan the true version. She recovered. From the birth. She's recovering. She doesn't know He gestures at the suit with a motion that encompasses everything the gesture is inadequate to explain. She thinks I'm dead. She should continue to think that. Yes, Anakin, yes, I know. I know. The vocoder strips the words flat, and he hates it. Hates it with the specific exhausted fury of a man who has spent 60 days having important conversations through an instrument that sounds nothing like him. I'm not going to contact her. I'm not going to. I know what is at stake. I know what happens if Palpatine finds a thread that leads to her or to. He stops. Does not say the name. There is a monitor on that name somewhere in the universe, he is almost certain, and old habits are operational necessities. I know. Obi-Wan studies him for a long time. What do you need from me? He asks. Nothing. I need nothing from you. Vader looks at the shelf, at the small folded robes, at the evidence of a life being quietly, stubbornly tended in the middle of a desert. I needed to know you were here, that someone, the respirator catches, the small, ragged hiccup that is the only form grief takes in this body, that someone who knows what I'm doing, knows that I'm doing it. The room is very quiet. Outside, the twin suns have begun their slow afternoon descent toward the canyon walls, and the light coming through the single small window has shifted from white to amber. Obi-Wan reaches across the table and places his hand on Vader's gauntlet. He does not say anything. There is nothing to say that the gesture doesn't carry more cleanly. They sit like that for a long time, an old master and the ruin of his student, in a one-room dwelling in the Junlan wastes, while outside the desert does what deserts do, endures and waits, and keeps its secrets in the sand. The inspection is logged as routine. The station does not yet have a name that anyone says aloud in official channels. In the engineering documentation it is referred to as Deep Space Clearance Initiative, Celestial Power, a designation so deliberately mundane that it achieves a kind of genius, hiding in plain sight the way all the Empire's worst ideas hide, behind language calibrated to make the listener's attention slide off it like water off sealed Durasteel. In the budget allocations it appears as Deep Space Construction Initiative, classified, Director Krennic. In Vader's private understanding of what it actually is, it is a question being asked in the language of engineering. How large does a weapon have to be before the weapon becomes the argument? The answer, apparently, is 120 kilometers in diameter. He has known about it since day 3. The project files were in the Imperial Intelligence Database, accessible to his clearance level with no flags or restrictions. Palpatine either does not think Vader poses a risk to the project, or, more likely, considers Vader's awareness of the station's existence a feature rather than a vulnerability. A leashed weapon that knows the size of its master's arsenal is a weapon that calculates the odds correctly. He has spent 4 months deciding what to do about it. Grand Moff Tarkin, a title so new the ink is still conceptually wet, receives him at the construction site's command hub with the precise calibration of a man who considers every interaction a negotiation and has already decided the opening position. Tarkin is angular where Palpatine is geological, sharp where Palpatine is patient. A man who communicates authority through economy of movement and the specific quality of attention he gives to things he considers beneath him, which is most things. He gives Vader a slightly longer version of that attention than he gives most things. "Lord Vader," he says, "the Emperor indicated you would be conducting a technical review." "He indicated correctly," Vader replies. Tarkin's expression moves through something that in a less disciplined face would be annoyance, and resolves instead into a thin accommodation. He gestures toward the primary engineering deck. "We are on schedule," he says, leading the way. "Primary superstructure at 63% completion. The tributary laser housing is fully operational. The superlaser focus lens assembly," he pauses at a viewport, and the station spreads beyond it in all directions, a curved horizon of gray construction and scaffolding, and the specific organized chaos of the largest engineering project in galactic history, is 12 months from operational readiness, pending final calibration. Vader looks at it. At the scale of it, at the 1,000-kilometer view of what human ambition looks like when it is given unlimited resources and no moral instruction. "I'll want access to the primary reactor housing," he says, "and the hyperdrive motivator array." Tarkin turns. The look is brief and entirely controlled. "The reactor housing is restricted to Chief Engineering Staff and Director Krennic's. I have full Imperial authority," Vader says. "If there is a conflict between that authority and Director Krennic's access protocols, I am content to resolve it with the Emperor directly." A pause. The length of a man doing arithmetic and arriving at an answer he dislikes. "Of course," Tarkin says. "I'll arrange an escort. The primary reactor housing is deep in the station's unfinished core, accessible through a construction lift that descends for 4 minutes through the skeletal interior of a sphere, large enough to swallow moons. The escort, 2 Imperial engineers and a security officer who is trying very hard not to visibly register how uncomfortable he is, says nothing during the descent. Vader says nothing either. He looks at the passing infrastructure and performs the mental exercise of seeing it simultaneously as what it is and what he intends it to become. What it is, the most powerful weapon ever constructed. What he intends it to become, a weapon with a flaw so fundamental that it negates the weapon. He has been designing the flaw for 3 months. The principle is elegant in the way that the best sabotage is elegant, not an addition but an absence. Not a device planted, but a calculation omitted. The exhaust port venting system for the primary reactor runs on a thermal regulation architecture that, in the current design specifications, routes directly to the station's outer hull in a single linear channel 2.02 meters in diameter. This is not a design oversight. This is an engineering constraint, forced by the reactor's size and the thermal output calculations, and every engineer on this project has looked at it, and concluded that the channel's location and the fire control systems make it a non-viable attack vector. They are correct under all standard combat modeling assumptions. He is going to make sure that the standard combat modeling assumptions are the only ones anyone tests against. The access modification he needs to make is not to the exhaust port itself. The port is fine. The port is, in fact, the point. What he needs to modify is the internal blast shield specification for the channel's terminal section. A document buried 4 levels deep in the thermal systems engineering package, authored by a mid-level engineer named Stalder who retired from the project 6 weeks ago and is currently living on Corellia under the impression that his pension cleared without incident. Which it did, because Vader ensured that it did, 2 months before he knew he would need Stalder's retirement to make this moment possible. The specification currently calls for a layered quadanium shield at the channel's internal junction. His modification, logged under Stalder's archived credentials, time-stamped 62 days ago, buried in a revision history that no active engineer has opened since the original submission, removes the quadanium layer and replaces it with a standard durasteel housing rated for thermal regulation but not for direct energy impact. The change was made 62 days ago. He is here today to confirm it survived the subsequent engineering reviews without being flagged or corrected. He stands in the reactor housing and reviews the physical installation through the Force, extending his awareness through the walls into the ductwork and shielding architecture with the patient, precise attention of a man checking his own work. The durasteel housing is there, exactly where the specification says it should be, exactly as inadequate as he designed it to be. He takes 40 seconds to be certain. Then he withdraws his awareness and turns back to the engineers. The motivator array next, he says. He finds Tarkin in the command hub afterward, reviewing construction projections with two aides who excuse themselves with the specific speed of people who have learned to read a room quickly. Satisfied? Tarkin asks. Sufficiently. Vader stands at the viewport. The station's curve fills the lower half of it, the construction lights running across its surface in slow patterns that look almost biological from this distance. The project is impressive. Tarkin, I have reservations about the timeline. The timeline is aggressive, Tarkin agrees, but achievable. Krennic's enthusiasm sometimes outpaces his logistics management, but the core engineering teams are. Not the construction timeline, Vader says. The operational one. Tarkin is quiet for a moment. I'm not certain I follow. When this station is operational, Vader says, slowly, choosing each word with the care of a man who has thought about this conversation for 4 months, it will be the most visible object in the galaxy. Every rebel cell, every sympathizer, every disaffected system with a grudge against Imperial authority will know it exists. Will want it destroyed. He turns from the viewport. A weapon of this scale changes the strategic calculus. It does not end resistance. It clarifies it. Tarkin studies him with the eyes of a man who is deciding whether he is being confided in or manipulated, and has not yet reached a conclusion. You think it invites attack, Tarkin says. I think it demands it, Vader replies. I would recommend a thorough review of all defensive vulnerability assessments before operational deployment, particularly the exhaust and thermal venting systems. Standard combat modeling has a tendency to underestimate creative targeting. He lets that sit for exactly as long as it needs to sit, long enough to be a legitimate strategic recommendation. Short enough that no subsequent analyst reviewing this conversation will find anything in it but professional diligence. I'll take it under advisement, Tarkin says, which means he will not. Tarkin is a man who has invested his reputation in this station's invincibility, and Vader has just recommended he question it, which is an invitation Tarkin's ego is constitutionally incapable of accepting. Vader has counted on this. He has designed around it the way he designed around the blast shield specification, not by removing the obstacle, but by understanding exactly how the obstacle will behave, and building the outcome into the plan before the obstacle knows it is part of one. He takes his leave of Tarkin with a nod and walks back toward the docking bay, and the construction lights of the station track slowly across the viewport behind him, and somewhere deep in the station's thermal architecture a durasteel housing sits quietly in a specification document and waits to matter. The summons arrives without warning. This is how Vader knows it is not routine. Routine summons from the Emperor come through official channels. A formal comm request logged through the Imperial Palace Communications Network, time-stamped, routed through Vader's administrative staff, arriving with the specific bureaucratic texture of an appointment. They give him preparation time, which is the point. A man who is given preparation time demonstrates, through the quality of his preparation, what he considers worth preparing for. This one comes directly. A single encrypted line to his private comm, a frequency only Palpatine uses, carrying 3 words in the Emperor's own voice. Come to me. No timestamp. No subject designation. No indication of what is waiting for him at the other end of the transit. He is aboard the Sovereign, his command ship, an Imperial-class Star Destroyer that has served as his operational base for the better part of a year, a vessel large enough to project authority across a system and discreet enough, in the context of the early Imperial fleet's expanding inventory, not to attract undue attention, reviewing inquisitorious deployment reports when the comm sounds. He reads the message twice. Then he sets down the datapad with a deliberateness that has nothing to do with calm and everything to do with controlling the things that can be controlled when the things that cannot be controlled have just announced themselves. He has 63 minutes of transit time to Coruscant to decide what Palpatine knows. He begins with the ledger. The inquisitorious failure rate is the most visible number. 18 months of operations, and the confirmed Jedi elimination count is low, embarrassingly low by any objective measure, though he has worked to ensure that the embarrassment lands on operational complexity rather than on his methodology. Hostile terrain, unreliable informant networks, targets who have proven more resourceful than preliminary intelligence suggested. All true. All carefully foregrounded in every report he has submitted. The methodology, the deliberately compromised GEMSO doctrine, the structural drag built into the database, is invisible behind the operational explanations, but the outcomes are not invisible. Outcomes are the one thing in intelligence work that cannot be entirely buried. The hidden path operations are the second number, harder to see but present if you look from the right angle. 41 Jedi and Force-sensitive individuals successfully relocated in 18 months. 41 against a confirmed elimination count that is less than a third of that. For anyone running the arithmetic from inside the ISB, the ratio is wrong. Not provably wrong. Not actionably wrong. But wrong in the specific way that anomalies are wrong. Quietly, persistently. In a way that accumulates, rather than resolves. The Death Star files are the third number and the one he is least certain about. The blast shield modification is buried deep enough that no active engineer has touched it. But Krennic is obsessive about his project in the way that small men with large ambitions are obsessive, and obsessive men have a tendency to eventually read everything. He runs through the possible combinations on the transit, what Palpatine has seen, what he has inferred, what he is testing for. By the time the shuttle enters Coruscant's upper atmosphere, he has 7 scenarios ranked by probability and a response architecture for each. He does not feel prepared. He proceeds anyway. The two things have never been required to coincide. The throne room has changed. This is the version he has been in 100 times in a future that has not happened, and it is close, but not identical. The construction still carries traces of its Republic-era bones. The throne platform slightly less elevated than it will eventually become, the Royal Guard positioning 2 degrees different from the configuration he knew. He catalogues the differences in the first 4 seconds and files them against his memory of what this room becomes, and notes that the direction of change is consistently toward something more theatrical, more explicitly designed to diminish the person approaching the throne. He approaches it, and does not allow himself to be diminished. Palpatine is not sitting. This, too, is information. In every routine meeting Vader has attended in 18 months, Palpatine is seated when he arrives, the posture of a man so secure in his authority that he does not need to rise to establish it. Standing means the calculus has shifted. Standing means something has changed. The Emperor stands at the throne room's viewport, hands clasped behind his back, watching Coruscant's endless light grid below. He does not turn when Vader enters. He speaks to the viewport. "Do you know what I have always admired about the galaxy's great predators?" he asks. Vader stops at the prescribed distance. "No, Master, patience." Palpatine turns, and the yellow eyes find him with the specific quality of attention that has, in Vader's experience, preceded every significant act of violence Palpatine has ever committed. A predator without patience is merely an animal. Patience is what separates the hunter from the creature that only reacts. He descends the platform steps slowly, hands still clasped. "I have been patient, Lord Vader. I want you to understand that. The patience I am about to abandon has been considerable." The architecture of the trap is visible before the trap fully closes. Vader recognizes it the way he recognizes the opening moves of a combat form he knows, not because he has been told what is coming, but because he has studied the Master's tendencies for long enough that prediction requires no special gift. He says nothing. He waits. Patience against patience. Palpatine stops 4 meters away. He produces a datapad from within his robes and extends it without crossing the remaining distance. A royal guard carries it forward. Vader takes it, reads it. It is a compiled analysis. 18 months of inquisitorious operational data, laid against a parallel track of hidden path refugee movement intelligence, sourced from 3 separate ISB divisions. Cross-referenced against his own budget line authorizations. The document is 60 pages long and was authored by someone with significant analytical skill and access to data sources that should not have been available in combination. At its conclusion, a set of correlation coefficients between inquisitorious deployment gaps and successful hidden path extractions that falls, per the analyst's notation, significantly outside the range attributable to chance. The analyst's name is redacted. The date of completion is 2 weeks ago. He reads the entire document in 90 seconds. Then he closes the datapad and holds it at his side. "This is speculative," he says. "It is," Palpatine agrees. Pleasantly. Speculation built on 18 months of anomalous outcomes. Do you know what I find most interesting about it? He takes one more step closer. The yellow eyes do not move. The analyst who produced it was not looking for this. She was conducting a routine ISB efficiency review. She found this the way one finds rot, not by searching for it, but by pressing on something that should be solid, and feeling it give. The scenario he prepared for. Not the most probable one. The one he ranked fourth, because it required an analyst working from an orthogonal angle to the obvious approach, which he had assessed as unlikely. He recalibrates. Silently, the recalibration takes one breath. The inquisitorious failure rate is a function of target behavior, he says. Jedi survivors are not the untrained civilians the preliminary models assumed. The intelligence architecture inherited from the Republic, yes, Palpatine says. I have read your reports. The pleasantness has not left his voice. This is, Vader knows, the most dangerous version of Palpatine, the one who has already decided and is simply conducting the interview to see what the subject volunteers. Every one of them. They are very well written. A pause. Weighted and deliberate. You were always intelligent, my boy. Perhaps the most naturally gifted student I ever trained. Intelligent enough to know that a well-written report can make absence look like effort. 2 royal guards, Vader notices, have repositioned. Not obviously. 3 degrees, maybe 4. Enough to change their engagement angles. He notices everything and shows nothing. And now, Palpatine says, and his voice drops into the register that means the performance portion of the conversation is ending. I have another data point to add to this analysis. He gestures toward the far end of the throne room with a slight, precise movement of one hand. The door opens. A figure is escorted in by 2 more guards. Small, human, wearing the remnants of civilian clothes under an ISB prisoner designation band. A young woman, mid-20s. Her hands are bound. Her eyes, when they find Vader across the length of the room, carry the specific quality of terror that belongs to someone who has understood exactly what their presence here means for someone else. He knows her face. She is one of the Hidden Path's Coruscant coordinators. He has never met her in person. He knows her through 3 layers of cutouts and an encrypted comm signature, but he knows her face from an IB surveillance photograph he buried in a low-confidence file 14 months ago. Someone unburied it. Palpatine watches him look at her. Watches the mask, which shows nothing, and the body, which shows nothing, and searches with the Force for the frequency spike of recognition or alarm, and finds the wall. The scorched earth landscape of grief and controlled fury, the static that drowns the signal. Vader holds it perfectly, absolutely still. Prove to me the boy is truly dead, Lord Vader, Palpatine says softly. And his voice carries the specific register of a man who has waited a very long time for this question and is genuinely uncertain of the answer. Prove there is nothing left of him to save. The throne room is very quiet. Vader's hand moves to his lightsaber. His hand rests on the lightsaber hilt for 3 full seconds. 3 seconds is a long time. In a duel, 3 seconds is the difference between living and not. In a throne room with 2 repositioned royal guards and an emperor, who has spent 30 years studying the specific vocabulary of hesitation, 3 seconds is a confession. He knows this. He counts them anyway. The young woman, the coordinator, the hidden path operative whose name in the network is Sable, and whose real name is Mira Tessic, and who has, in the 14 months since he buried her surveillance file, moved 11 Force-sensitive children off Coruscant through a series of transport modifications so elegant he reviewed them with something adjacent to professional admiration. Stands very still between her two guards. She is not looking at him anymore. She is looking at the floor. The posture of someone who has decided that whatever happens next, they will not give it the satisfaction of their eyes. He recognizes that posture. He has worn it. His hand leaves the lightsaber. The movement is deliberate, not a failure to draw. A choice not to. The distinction will be lost on no one in this room, and he is not trying to hide it. The time for hiding is precisely, irrevocably over. "Run," he says. The word comes out through the vocoder in its flat mechanical register, and it goes to Mira Tesic, and she looks up from the floor and finds his face. The mask, the red lenses, the black architecture of everything she has been taught to fear. And she does not move for one full second, because her body has not yet communicated with her mind about what she just heard. "Run," he says again. "The eastern corridor, third door. It will be unlocked. It will be unlocked," because he unlocked it from his comm during the 3 seconds his hand was on the lightsaber hilt. A small act of preparation for a decision he has been building toward for 18 months, without quite admitting he was building toward it. Mira Tesic runs, the two guards holding her move to intercept, and Vader extends his hand and they stop. Not gently. They impact the throne room walls on opposite sides, with enough force to put them down for several minutes, which is more than enough time. And the sound of it, two armored bodies meeting stone, fills the room and then empties out of it into a ringing quiet. The remaining guards have their force pikes raised. Vader does not look at them. He is looking at Palpatine. The Emperor's face does something Vader has seen it do only twice in his life. It drops. Not into shock. Palpatine does not shock. The emotional architecture that produces shock was excised, or atrophied or deliberately dismantled decades before Anakin Skywalker ever walked into a Senate office and was offered a seat. What it drops into is something older and less performed than any expression he usually wears. A fury so fundamental, it is almost structural. The fury of a craftsman who has discovered, in the finished product he spent 20 years building, a flaw introduced by the product itself. 18 months, Palpatine says. The voice is very quiet. Quiet the way a pressure vessel is quiet before the seal gives. "Yes," Vader says. "The Inquisitorious. Compromised from the first day. The budget lines. Not a question. An accounting. Auric 7. A fabrication. The funds moved through the hidden path. Each admission lands in the room like a stone dropped into still water, the rings spreading outward into the silence. He is not confessing to unburden himself. He is confirming what Palpatine already knows, which removes the Emperor's ability to use the unknown as a lever. A secret Palpatine suspects is a weapon in Palpatine's hands. A secret confirmed is simply a fact, and facts are less useful to a man who prefers to work in the space between what is known and what can be proven. "The station," Palpatine says. A pause. Shorter than the others. "You should have your engineers review the thermal exhaust specifications," Vader says. "Particularly the blast shield tolerances in the primary reactor channel." The fury on Palpatine's face does something extraordinary. It deepens past fury into something that has no clean name. The expression of a man recalculating the scope of a betrayal mid-conversation and finding it significantly larger than the initial estimate. His hands, clasped behind his back throughout, come forward. The yellow eyes are absolutely still. "You have been doing this," Palpatine says slowly since the cave, since the first breath. Lightning comes without further warning. It is not a probe or a test. The lightning arrives full force, the opening strike of a man who has terminated the conversation portion of the encounter and moved directly to the conclusion he has already written. Blue-white, branching. The kind of force lightning that turns the air between them into a conducting medium and fills the throne room with the sound of it. A sustained crackling roar that bounces off the stone walls and comes back doubled. The acoustics of the room weaponized along with everything else. Vader catches it on the blade. The lightsaber comes to his hand and ignites in the same motion, red blade angled to intercept, and the lightning hits it and spreads across the blade's surface in a corona that would, with any normal crystal, stress the kyber matrix to its fracture threshold. The blade holds, the crystal inside, the healed one. The one that exhaled in a volcanic cave and has spent 18 months being held in a setting that misrepresents it, and has endured that misrepresentation with the patience of something that trusts the hand holding it, absorbs the impact, and distributes it through its lattice without complaint. The suit is less composed about it. The electrical systems along his left arm begin throwing alerts in the first 3 seconds. The chest panel's primary display flickers. The left leg's actuator system flags a stress reading that the internal processor marks as non-critical, but that he marks, in the part of his mind running parallel assessments, as something that will matter later. He takes 1 step forward into the lightning. The throne room's light fractures around him, the blue-white of the lightning, the red of the blade, the yellow of the Emperor's eyes finding him through the electrical storm with the absolute attention of something that has, in 30 years of engineering catastrophes, never faced one it did not eventually solve. Palpatine redirects. The lightning stops. For exactly half a second the room exists in a silence, so complete it has texture. Then, both of Palpatine's hands come up together, and the throne room becomes something other than a room. Equipment tears from its moorings, a viewport on the eastern wall spiderwebs and holds. The 2 guards who were still standing hit the floor as the concussive force moves through the space like a pressure wave. And Vader plants his feet, and meets it with the force braced in front of him like a wall, and feels the impact travel up through the suit's skeleton into his spine, and registers it as pain, and files the pain as data, and continues. He reaches into his left hand with 2 fingers while the right holds the blade level. The crimson filter is in a housing on the lightsaber's emitter section, a small, precisely machined component that has done its work for 18 months and is now finished with it. He finds it by touch. He has disassembled and reassembled this hilt hundreds of times in the dark of the Nerve facility, on sleepless nights, keeping his hands familiar with the architecture of the lie so that he could always find every piece of it. He crushes the filter in his mechanical grip. The pieces fall to the throne room floor, tiny fragments of engineered deception scattered across the stone. He ignites the blade. The sound it makes is different. The healed crystal, freed from the filter's interference, produces a tone instead of a hiss, a clean, resonant, clear ignition note that fills the room from floor to ceiling in the half-second before it settles into its sustained hum. And the light it throws is different. Not the aggressive red that reads as rage made physical. Not the emergency white of something purified by force. The quiet, absolute white of something that chose to be still. The throne room, hit by the light of it, looks like something it has never looked like in its imperial configuration. Like a place where a different kind of decision might be made. Palpatine stares at it. Impossible, he says. The word carries genuine weight for the first time. Not a tactical response, but an involuntary one. The reaction of a man whose entire cosmology has just produced a result outside its parameters. There is no Jedi left in you to save. Vader looks at the white blade. Then, at Palpatine. You were wrong about that, he says from the very beginning. The throne room holds the 2 of them in its fractured light, lightning blue on the edges of things, white at the center, the Emperor on one side of it and Darth Vader standing in the middle of it, with a blade that is finally the color of what it actually is. Outside the viewport, Coruscant's endless city burns its million lights into the dark, indifferent and enormous, knowing nothing of what is about to be settled in this room. Palpatine moves first. This is not a surprise. Palpatine has always moved first. It is the foundational principle of everything he has ever built, the strategic axiom that underlies 30 years of patient construction. Move first. Move early. Move before the other party has finished deciding whether they are in a conflict. The war is half over before the opponent understands it has begun. He crosses the distance between them in a way that should not be physically possible for a man of his age, and chooses, deliberately, not to use the blade. The blade is a concession. It acknowledges an opponent worth fighting at distance. Both hands come up instead, and the lightning returns, but different from the opening strike. Not the sustained roar of a man expressing fury. Short, targeted bursts, each one aimed at a specific system on the suit, each one reading the previous impact and adjusting, the way a diagnostician adjusts a probe based on what each test reveals. He is not trying to kill Vader with the lightning, he is trying to find out what the suit can still do. Vader understands this in the first 4 seconds, and moves left to take the 5th burst on the blade rather than the chest panel, which is still throwing the alert from the initial exchange and does not need a second opinion. He feels the crystal absorb it, cleanly, completely, the lattice distributing the energy through its structure the way water distributes through a delta, finding every available channel and arriving at nothing. No stress reading, no fracture warning. The healed crystal does not resist the lightning. It receives it. This too is different. A standard Kyber matrix under lightning impact fights the energy. The crystal's internal resistance produces the secondary crackle visible along a stressed blade. The harmonic destabilization that makes prolonged lightning exposure dangerous for the wielder as much as the target. This crystal has no resistance left in it. It made its peace with force absorption in a volcanic cave 18 months ago and has not reconsidered. He takes one step toward Palpatine and redirects the absorbed charge back through the blade in a single controlled pulse. The Emperor takes it on crossed forearms, the dark side forming a physical barrier, and the pulse drives him back 2 steps. 2 steps backward for Palpatine is a seismic event. He has watched this man, in 30 years of memory that hasn't happened yet, never give ground without intent. The 2 steps are genuine. Palpatine reassesses. Vader can see it, a micro-adjustment in posture, a shift in the quality of attention. The diagnostician has his data. He is revising his methodology. The blade comes out. A second lightsaber, crimson, produced from within his robes with the fluid ease of a man who has carried it there for decades and has never once needed to think about where his hand was going. The form he opens with is not the aggressive fury channeling style Vader expected, the form the 7 Juyo that channels passion into controlled, unpredictable violence. The form most consistent with Palpatine's emotional register and the one Vader has seen him use before. Instead he opens with Makashi, Form 2, ancient, elegant. Developed precisely for blade against blade engagement between highly skilled opponents, a form so economical in its movements that it reads, to an untrained eye, as almost conversational. Each strike a question, each riposte an answer. The whole exchange the vocabulary of a man who has been in more duels than anyone alive, and has decided that efficiency is the only luxury that matters. Against most opponents, it is decisive within a minute. Vader does not block. He has spent 22 years of one life training in Gemso, the form built on meeting power with greater power, on turning the opponent's attack into the foundation for a counterattack of greater magnitude. He spent 20 more years in the suit fighting with it modified, compensating for the armor's limitations, building a style around what the suit permits rather than what his body once could. He knows Gemso the way he knows the sound of his own respirator. He knows its strength, and he knows the thing that lives in its blind spot. He abandons it entirely. What he does instead has no formal name, because it is not a form. It is the product of 45 years of accumulated combat intelligence applied without the interference of ego or anger or the need to demonstrate anything to anyone. A fluid, reactive, minimum motion defense that meets each of Palpatine's strikes at the point of least resistance and redirects, rather than opposes. He does not try to overpower. He does not try to perform. He moves like water moves, not because water is weak, but because water does not waste energy fighting the shape of the container. Palpatine's first combination, 6 strikes, each one carrying enough kinetic force to drive a standard opponent to their knees, finds nothing to push against. Each blade meets Vader's at a redirecting angle and slides off. No impact forces. No accumulating structural stress on the suit's arm joints. Just redirection and stillness. And the economy of a man who is not in a hurry because he understands that patience is not passivity. It is its own form of power. 3 minutes into the duel, Palpatine changes tactics. He abandons the blade entirely. An act of contempt, possibly, or an act of calculation. A man conceding the physical exchange in order to pursue the one available to him that Vader cannot win with patience and economy. The lightsaber extinguishes and the Force rises in his hands, in a configuration Vader has seen once in his life, in the only version of this encounter that previously existed, watching it from the wrong side. The full concatenation. Every Force technique Palpatine knows, layered into a single sustained assault, telekinetic pressure, lightning, Force drain. The specific dark side technique that disrupts a Force user's connection to the living Force itself. Each one alone is manageable. In concatenation, they are meant to overwhelm triage. Too many fires in too many rooms for one being to address all of them simultaneously. He addresses none of them. He holds the white blade up, vertical, in both hands, the hilt at chest height and the blade extending straight above him, and he opens the Force connection to the crystal as wide as it will go. The crystal exhales. The light from the blade expands, not physically, not in a way that would register on a sensor, but in the Force it opens outward like a room suddenly becoming a sky. The concatenation hits it, and the crystal does what it has been doing since a volcanic cave, and a man stopped fighting it. Absorbs. Distributes. Receives without resistance. The throne room fills with white. It is not dramatic. It does not roar or crack or produce the pyrotechnic spectacle of two dark side powers meeting in collision. It is quiet. The way the end of a long illness can be quiet, not an event so much as the cessation of one. The absence of a pressure that has been so constant it stopped registering as pressure. Palpatine's concatenation hits the expanded field of the healed crystal and dissipates. Not repelled. Dissipated, the distinction is everything. A wall repels by being harder than the thing hitting it. This is not a wall. This is the ocean receiving rain. The energy arrives, and is received, and becomes part of something larger, and is no longer a weapon. Palpatine stops. This too is unprecedented. Vader marks it, files it, does not let it become pride, because pride is a door the dark side knows how to open. How? Palpatine says. Not a question he expects answered. A data point he cannot integrate. Stated aloud the way a diagnostic system states an error it cannot resolve. He looks at the white light in the room, and his yellow eyes are doing something Vader has never seen them do. Searching. The eyes of a man whose map has failed him, and who is, for the first time in decades, navigating without one. Peace, Vader says. You built everything you have on detecting rage. I passed through it. There was nothing left for your sensors to find. Palpatine's jaw tightens. He takes one step backward and gathers the dark side around him, the way a man in a storm gathers a coat. Not warmly, not for comfort, but for whatever shelter remains available. Vader moves. Not fast. Not with the theatrical velocity of anger-fueled combat. With the settled, irreversible momentum of a decision fully made. The white blade comes down in a single clean arc, and Palpatine brings both hands up, and the dark side rises between them in a final barrier. And the blade meets it, and passes through it the way light passes through a gap it has been waiting a long time to reach. The throne room goes quiet. Very, very quiet. Palpatine folds. Not dramatically. The way a structure folds when the load-bearing element is removed. A subsidence. A settling. A collapse that looks almost gentle until it is complete. He goes down to the throne room floor between the dais steps and the viewport, and the dark side goes out of the room like a held breath finally released, and the white light of the blade is the only light remaining. Vader stands over him for a long moment. Then he extinguishes the blade. The throne room is just a room now. Stone and viewports and the distant light of Coruscant coming through the glass. Indifferent and cold and carrying no opinion about what just happened in here. The royal guards are down. He does not know when. Does not remember the specific moments. The combat brain filing them under addressed and moving on. The Emperor lies still. He stands in the silence and breathes, and the respirator marks the breathing in its mechanical way, and the suit's alert systems are running a list of failures that he reads with the detached attention of a man reviewing damage he always knew was coming. Left arm actuator, compromised. Chest panel primary, offline, secondary holding. Respirator function, degraded, sufficient. Right leg, stress fracture in the knee joint. Load-bearing capacity reduced to 60%. The suit is failing. It has been failing for 18 months, managed and maintained and asked to carry more than it was designed for. And now, on the other side of the thing it was asked to survive, it is failing fully. He is alone in the throne room of the Galactic Empire with a white blade and a broken body, and the specific, extraordinary quiet of a man who has finished the thing he came to do. He breathes. It is enough. The throne room terminal takes 4 minutes to access, not because the security architecture resists him. His command authorization still functions. Will continue to function until someone thinks to revoke it, and no one is thinking about that right now, because no one knows yet what has happened in this room, but because the left arm actuator is gone and he is working the terminal one-handed, the mechanical right hand moving through the access sequence with the deliberate care of a man who understands that this is the last important thing. These fingers will do and wants to do it correctly. Palpatine's private files are organized with the specific, obsessive clarity of a man who trusted no one and therefore documented everything. 30 years of manipulation, coercion, and manufactured catastrophe, indexed and cross-referenced and stored in a directory structure that reads like the administrative record of a civilization's systematic destruction. Assassination authorizations. Senate corruption ledgers. The full Sith lineage documentation going back 800 years. Order 66's legal architecture and the clone inhibitor chip specifications and the names of every Kaminoan engineer who knew what they built. All of it. He opens a new transmission protocol and addresses it to 17 separate coordinates simultaneously. Rebel Alliance intelligence cells, ISB defectors he has been quietly tracking for 2 years. 3 sympathetic journalists embedded in imperial media organizations, and the office of Bail Organa on Alderaan, the last address he triple checks, because some transmissions matter more than others, and this one matters most. He compresses the files, attaches them to the transmission. His finger rests on the send authorization for exactly 1 second. The Ghost's last transmission. He sends it. The confirmation receipt comes back in fragments as each address acknowledges. 17 small lights appearing in the terminal's output log, one after another, quiet and sequential, like stars becoming visible as a sky darkens. He watches all 17 appear. Then, he closes the terminal and steps back from it and does not look at it again. The shuttle bay is 3 levels down and the turbolift is non-operational, a casualty of the throne room's power disruption during the duel, which means 3 levels of stairs in a suit running on secondary systems with a compromised left arm and a right knee at 60% load capacity. He takes the stairs. Each step is a specific, itemized event. The right knee reports its stress fracture on every stair with the consistency of a system that has decided if it is going to fail, it will fail loudly. The chest panel's secondary display flickers at irregular intervals, the power draw from the respirator creating momentary brownouts in everything else. The left arm hangs at a fixed angle, the actuator locked in its last position. A black gauntlet, pointing at nothing. He counts the stairs. There are 41 of them across 3 flights. He counts them because counting is something to do with the part of his mind that wants to think about other things, and thinking about other things right now is a luxury that the stairs, and the knee, and the flickering chest panel do not permit. On the second landing he stops for a moment and rests his right hand against the wall. The suit's respirator adjusts its cycle, a slightly deeper draw, the mechanical equivalent of catching a breath, and the sound of it in the stairwell comes back to him in a brief echo. He has been listening to that sound for 18 months. He understands now, not be listening to it much longer. The math is not complicated. The suit's primary systems have an operational window measured in hours, not days, and there is no imperial medical facility he can walk into, and no inquisitorious technical staff he can call, and even if there were, the destination he has chosen is not one that a functioning suit is required for. He finishes the stairs. The shuttle bay officer takes one look at him and finds something very important to examine on the opposite side of the bay. The shuttle is where he left it, a light Imperial courier vessel, the kind that passes through checkpoints on command authorization rather than inspection, fast enough for the distance he needs to cover, and small enough to land in the Junland wastes without announcing itself, to Mos Eisley's traffic control. He walks up the ramp, seals it behind him, sits in the pilot's seat with the careful, deliberate movement of a man managing a body that is managing its own departure. He plots the course to Tatooine. The jump to hyperspace takes 9 seconds from Coruscant's gravity well boundary. He sits in the blue-white tunnel of it, and does not sleep, and does not plan, and does not run assessments. He lets the 9 seconds of hyperspace be 9 seconds of hyperspace, which is something he has not permitted himself in 18 months, and it turns out to be enough. Tatooine receives him the way it always has. Heat and silence and the twin suns at late afternoon, throwing double shadows from the canyon walls across the sand. He sets the shuttle down 2 kilometers from the dwelling, and sits in the cockpit for a moment after the engines cycle down, not hesitating, just finishing the act of arriving before beginning the act of whatever comes next. Obi-Wan is outside when he opens the ramp, not at the door of the dwelling. Outside, in the sand, 40 meters from the shuttle. Standing in his desert robes with his hands at his sides, in the posture of a man who has been waiting and is not surprised by what he is waiting for. The Force told him. The Force tells Obi-Wan things with the consistency of a system that considers him worth informing, and what it told him today Vader does not know exactly, but the specific quality of stillness Obi-Wan is holding. The stillness of someone who has had a few hours to make their peace with something difficult, suggests it was sufficient. Vader walks to him through the sand. The right knee makes the walk a slow one. The left arm is still fixed at its angle. The chest panel flickers twice during the 2-kilometer crossing, and recovers twice, and by the time he reaches Obi-Wan. The respirator's cycle has developed a slight irregularity, a hitch every 7th breath, small, not yet critical, the mechanical version of a stutter. Obi-Wan looks at the suit, at the damage, at the white blade hilt on his hip where the red one used to be. His face does what Obi-Wan's face does, holds its steadiness through an effort that is visible only if you know where to look, and Vader knows exactly where to look. "It's done," Vader says. "Yes," Obi-Wan says. "I know." They stand in the sand between the shuttle and the canyon wall, and the twin suns are doing what the twin suns do at this hour, bleeding amber into the western sky, the light going long and warm across everything, making the desert look, briefly, like a place that was intended to be beautiful. "I need to sit down," Vader says. "I know that too," Obi-Wan says. They sit against the canyon wall, in the shadow of it, side by side in the sand the way they never quite managed to sit in any version of their lives together, without argument pending, without mission parameters, without the specific exhausting work of 2 people who love each other and cannot agree on anything. Obi-Wan removes the mask. He does it himself, his hands finding the release catches with the careful attention of a man who is prepared for this and does not want to get it wrong. The seals disengage. The mask comes free. The air of Tatooine, dry, hot, carrying the mineral smell of baked sand and the faint organic note of the desert's sparse life, reaches a face that has not felt open air in 18 months. Anakin Skywalker closes his eyes. The light on his face is amber and warm and entirely indifferent to what it is illuminating, which is exactly right. The desert owes him nothing, and gives him this anyway. The late sun on a face that has not been a face for a long time. Just the inside of a mask. Just the private architecture of a man who was not yet finished. "Tell him," he says. His voice, without the vocoder, is rough and quiet and entirely his own. He had been afraid it would not be. "Tell him his father loved him," he says. All of him. A breath, the hitch in the respirator that is not, now, relevant to anything. Even this part. Obi-Wan's hand is on his. Not the gauntlet. His hand. The seals came loose with the mask. "He'll know," Obi-Wan says. "Not from me." "No," Obi-Wan agrees. "Not from you." "But he'll know." The twin suns touch the canyon rim. The amber light goes brief and deep, and then the sky begins its turn toward the particular blue-violet of a Tatooine evening, the color that exists nowhere else in the galaxy. The color of a sky that has 2 stars setting simultaneously and has developed its own vocabulary for the event. Anakin Skywalker watches it for as long as he can. Then, he is still. On a ridge above the Lars homestead, as the last light leaves the sky, a boy stands with his hands in his pockets and watches the place where the suns were. He does this most evenings. No particular reason. Something about the moment between the light and the dark that he cannot name but returns to anyway. The way people return to things that mean something before they know what the meaning is. He does not notice the two figures standing quietly behind him. He has never been able to notice them. They are made of something the living are not equipped to perceive. A warmth without source. A sense of company without presence. The specific feeling of being watched over by something that wants nothing from you except for you to be all right. He is all right. The boy puts his hands in his pockets and watches the dark come in over the desert. And behind him, in the last warmth of a day that is ending, Anakin Skywalker stands in the only place he ever wanted to be. He was Vader to the galaxy, and Anakin to almost no one, but he was, in the end, exactly the man he always should have been. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.